The Galactic Council chamber was filled with silence, a cold and calculated quiet that spread through the vast hall like a shadow, stretching across the faces of the alien diplomats seated in their high chairs, their expressions twisted with a sense of authority and arrogance, as if the life standing before them meant nothing, as if the fate of one man was already sealed before he even had a chance to plead his case. At the center of the chamber, restrained by heavy energy chains that wrapped around his wrists and ankles, stood Ambassador Daniel Carter, a man who had dedicated his life to peace, to diplomacy, to ensuring that humanity would never have to fight another war across the stars, a man who believed that words could resolve conflicts, that understanding could bridge the divide between species. But in that moment, as he looked up at the cold, unfeeling eyes of the council members, he realized something terrifying. They had never been interested in peace at all. The Supreme Chancellor of the Council, a towering reptilian being with emerald scales and piercing yellow eyes, leaned forward from his grand seat, his voice echoing through the hall with a tone so sharp it felt like a blade cutting through the air, his words dripping with disdain as he declared that humanity had violated the sacred laws of the galactic order, that Earth had spread its influence where it did not belong, and that the Council had no choice but to make an example out of the species that refused to learn its place. Daniel, despite the bruises on his face, despite the pain coursing through his body from the Council's harsh treatment, refused to lower his head, refused to show fear, because he knew that this was not just about him, that this was about something far greater, something the Council had feared from the moment humanity first stepped into the stars. "This is not justice," Daniel said, his voice steady, unwavering, even as the guards beside him tightened their grip on his arms, their claws digging into his skin. "This is a warning, a threat meant to keep humanity in chains, meant to keep us quiet, meant to stop us from becoming what we are destined to be. But you don't understand us at all, do you?" Laughter echoed from the seats above, cruel and mocking, as one of the council members, a multi-eyed insectoid diplomat, clicked its mandibles in amusement before speaking in a voice that buzzed through the air like static. "Your kind still believes in destiny. Foolish human. There is no destiny for the weak. There is only submission or death." A wave of approval spread across the council chamber, diplomats nodding their heads in agreement, their minds already made up, their judgment passed long before this trial had even begun. There was never going to be mercy. There was never going to be fairness. There was only the cruel, inevitable sentence they had already written. "Then let humanity hear our verdict," the Supreme Chancellor announced, standing tall, raising his clawed hand high above his head as the chamber trembled with energy, the walls humming as the execution device powered on, the air becoming thick with the scent of burning ozone. Daniel clenched his fists, taking one last deep breath, knowing that he would not leave this place alive, knowing that his people would soon hear of his fate. But even as he stared into the face of death, he did not break, he did not beg, he did not give them the satisfaction of seeing a human bow. A platform beneath him shifted, and suddenly fire erupted around him, energy flames that roared like an unleashed beast, heat that licked at his skin, searing pain that spread through every inch of his body as the council watched, their faces indifferent, their hearts untouched, their arrogance blinding them to the horror of what they had just done. The galaxy watched too. The execution was broadcast across every system, to every world that held a screen, to every species that had doubted the Council's cruelty, to every ally of humanity that had once believed in the dream of peace. And deep within the Sol system on Earth, in the very heart of humanity's homeworld, billions of people watched in stunned silence as their ambassador, a man who had represented their hope for peace, was burned alive, his screams echoing through the darkness of space. For a moment, there was only quiet. And then, a single message was sent back to the Council. No threats, no demands, no warnings. Just 3 simple words, written in a way that felt colder than death itself. You chose war. The Galactic Council chamber was filled with an eerie silence after the execution. The diplomats, the rulers of the Galactic Order, had no remorse, no hesitation. To them, the human had been a mere nuisance, a weak race's attempt at proving themselves equal among the stars. They believed it was over, that humanity would cower, that they would surrender. But they didn't understand humans at all. Across the stars, across the vast reaches of space, the execution was watched by billions. Human colonies, space stations, military command centers, and even the ordinary citizens of Earth stood frozen as they saw the flames consume their ambassador, a man who had never raised a weapon, a man who had only wanted peace. There was no need for long speeches, no need for debate. The message was clear. The Council had declared war. On Earth, the United Human Defense Command received the footage in real time. For several minutes, there was no sound inside the war room. The highest-ranking officers of humanity stood in absolute silence, their hands clenched, their jaws tight, their eyes locked onto the screen that had just displayed the cruelest act of the century. No one spoke. No one moved. The air was heavy with something that had not been felt in a long time. Something ancient, something unstoppable. Anger. A woman in a dark military uniform stepped forward, her eyes sharp as steel, her face like stone. Admiral Helena Carter, the sister of the fallen ambassador, did not weep. She did not break. She only turned to the council of admirals and generals surrounding her and spoke with a voice that sent chills through every soldier in the room. Activate the Leviathan Protocol. For a moment, even the most hardened officers hesitated. The Leviathan Protocol was not a simple military response. It was not a fleet deployment. It was something far greater, something the galaxy had never seen before. The council members exchanged glances, uncertainty flickering in their eyes. One of the senior commanders, an older man with decades of experience, finally asked, "Are you certain, Admiral? If we activate Leviathan, there is no turning back." Helena's gaze did not waver. There was no turning back the moment they burned my brother alive. Across human space, encrypted orders were sent in a silent wave of digital whispers. Giant warships, hidden within asteroid fields and dark nebulae, powered up for the first time in years. Long-dormant weapons, ones that had been built in secrecy for a day humanity hoped would never come, were armed. A fleet unlike anything the galaxy had ever known began to move. On Mars, deep beneath the surface, ancient war factories roared to life, producing weapons of destruction that had never been tested in real battle. On Titan, nuclear forges burned hotter than ever, preparing an arsenal of missiles capable of wiping entire fleets from existence. And on Earth, the very heart of humanity, billions of people watched as a single message was broadcast to every colony, every ship, every outpost. It was a recording. The last words of Ambassador Daniel Carter before his capture. His voice was calm, but his eyes held the fire of a man who had known what was coming. To my people, if you are watching this, then you already know what has happened. You already know that the Galactic Council has chosen to end peace with fire and cruelty. But they have made a mistake. They think we will surrender. They think we will kneel. They think humanity can be broken. Let them learn the truth. His image faded to black. Then 3 words appeared across every screen, glowing like fire. You chose war. The war had begun. The Galactic Council had ruled for centuries, their power unquestioned, their authority absolute. They had crushed rebellions, silenced dissent, and shaped the galaxy according to their will. To them, humanity was nothing more than another race to be tamed, another species to be brought to heel. But they had never faced anything like this before. The first sign of humanity's response came in the form of silence. No diplomats, no negotiations, no threats, just silence. The Council expected a desperate plea, an offer of surrender, an attempt to negotiate for survival. Instead, they received nothing. It was unsettling, unnatural. Even the most defiant races had begged when the Council struck against them. But humanity did not. Then, without warning, the First Fleet disappeared. The Alvaran Task Force, a heavily armed battle group assigned to patrol the outer colonies, simply vanished. No distress signals, no wreckage, no survivors. Dozens of warships erased from existence. The Council's admirals dismissed it at first, assuming a navigational failure or some freak accident. But then it happened again. Fleet after fleet, patrols and strongholds, supply lines and communications hubs, all began to fall into chaos. Ships would go dark without explanation. Military outposts would send an emergency signal, only for reinforcements to arrive and find nothing but empty space where entire bases had once stood. The Council had faced wars before, but nothing like this. There were no massive battles, no grand invasions, no planets being conquered. Humanity wasn't fighting a traditional war. They were hunting. In the heart of the Council's capital, Supreme Chancellor Varric stood in the war chamber, watching as the reports came flooding in. The room was filled with tension, fear creeping into the voices of the military leaders who had once spoken with confidence. "This is impossible," one of the generals muttered, his mandibles clicking in frustration. "How can an enemy with such small numbers cause this much destruction? We have more ships. We have more soldiers. They should be losing." Another officer, his eyes darting between holoscreens, whispered, "It's like they know our every move before we make it." Varric's claws dug into the armrest of his throne-like seat. "Show me the latest surveillance data," he commanded. The central screen flickered, displaying grainy footage taken from a damaged outpost before it had gone silent. The camera showed a fleet of Council warships, fully armed and ready, waiting in formation. Then shadows moved in the void. Shapes emerged from the darkness, ships unlike anything the Council had encountered before. They were sleek, silent, and fast, moving in ways that defied conventional tactics. The human warships struck with surgical precision. They didn't charge recklessly or engage in wasteful battles. They attacked from the shadows, using superior technology, overwhelming firepower, and an unsettling level of strategy. Before the Council ships could even react, their engines were disabled, their command decks breached, their weapons neutralized. The battle was over before it had even begun. And then, the footage cut to black. A chilling silence filled the war chamber. One of the analysts, his voice barely above a whisper, said, "They are not fighting for territory. They are not claiming resources. They are not negotiating." Varric narrowed his eyes. "Then what are they doing?" The analyst swallowed hard. "They're punishing us." Across the galaxy, the nightmare continued. Council-controlled planets went into full lockdown. Defenses were reinforced. Every available warship was deployed. Yet it didn't matter. The humans were everywhere and nowhere at the same time. They struck without warning and vanished before anyone could react. Their weapons were beyond anything the Council had expected, their strategies unpredictable. And then came the final message. A single human vessel, heavily shielded and nearly impossible to intercept, broadcast a transmission to every major system under the Council's control. The screen was dark at first, then a figure stepped into view, Admiral Helena Carter. Her voice was calm. "Cold. You took something from us, and now we take everything from you." The transmission ended, and the war truly began. The Galactic Council had faced wars before. They had crushed rebellions, conquered entire species, and enforced their rule with an iron grip. But nothing they had ever encountered was like this. The humans weren't fighting for territory. They weren't seeking peace. They weren't asking for negotiations. They were here for vengeance. Council worlds that had once been thriving centers of trade and power now lived in terror. The fleets that had once enforced their dominance were vanishing one by one. No massive battles, no direct invasions, just destruction from the shadows. The Council's admirals were growing desperate, throwing fleets in every direction, But the humans never engaged in a fight they couldn't win. They struck like ghosts, silent, precise, and merciless. Supreme Chancellor Virik stood in the Grand War Chamber, surrounded by his highest military commanders. The air was thick with fear, something he had never witnessed before in these seasoned officers. They had commanded armies that spanned the stars, crushed rebellions without hesitation, and now they were afraid of a single species. "We have lost the Krellin fleet," one of the generals said, his voice trembling slightly. Virik narrowed his glowing yellow eyes. "Lost? How do you lose an entire fleet?" There was no distress signal, the general continued. No escape pods, no survivors. It was as if they were erased from existence. The last recorded transmission was disturbing. The holoscreen flickered to life, showing the final moments of the Krellin fleet. The massive warships hovered in formation, their weapons primed. Then, without warning, something cut through the darkness. A ripple in space, a disturbance. Then the screaming started. Not from the humans. From the Council soldiers. Their systems failed in an instant. Shields collapsed, weapons powered down, and suddenly their own ships turned against them. Hacked, controlled, forced to fire upon their own allies. A single voice, cold and emotionless, cut through the chaos. "You should have let us grieve." The transmission ended. Virik clenched his fists, his claws digging into the armrest of his throne. "How?" he demanded. "How are they doing this?" "They have technology we do not understand," another commander admitted. "They have tactics that defy logic. He hesitated before finishing his thought. "They are fighting as if they have nothing to lose." A heavy silence filled the chamber. One of the analysts spoke, his voice quiet but firm. "We believed humans were weak because they sought peace. We believed they were fragile because they showed mercy. We believed they would kneel when we struck them down." He turned to face the Supreme Chancellor directly. "But we were wrong." Across the galaxy, the war had escalated into something the Council could no longer control. The humans had no homeworld left to defend, no centralized government to negotiate with. They were scattered, but they were relentless. Entire planetary defense systems were overridden in seconds. The elite Council forces stationed on fortress worlds found themselves outmaneuvered, outgunned, and overwhelmed by human forces that seemed to anticipate their every move. Ships that should have been impenetrable were torn apart from the inside, their crews never even seeing their attackers before they died. But the worst was yet to come. In the depths of space, hidden beyond the edges of the Council's most classified star charts, a forgotten station came to life. A facility the Council had ignored for centuries, believing it to be unimportant. The humans had found it. And inside, they had uncovered something the Council had tried to erase. The truth. A transmission was sent across the galaxy. A message broadcast to every species under the Council's rule. It was not a threat. It was not a demand. It was a recording. It showed the final moments of the human diplomat, the one the Council had burned alive. His screams, his suffering, the cruelty of the Council's actions. Everything was laid bare for the entire galaxy to see. And then, a new message appeared. There will be no forgiveness. The war was no longer about survival. It was no longer about revenge. It was about justice. And the humans would not stop until the Council was nothing more than a memory. The Galactic Council's defenses were crumbling. Their war fleets, once symbols of unstoppable power, had been reduced to wreckage scattered across the void. Their fortress worlds, once thought to be impenetrable, were falling one by one. And the worst part, they never even saw their enemy coming. The humans weren't fighting a traditional war. There were no grand fleets clashing in open space, no drawn-out sieges. The humans struck like ghosts, silent, precise, and merciless. Entire Council command centers were wiped out in a single night. High-ranking officials disappeared without a trace. Factories that built warships mysteriously detonated, leaving nothing but twisted metal and debris. Chancellor Virik sat in his private war chamber, his claws digging into the armrest of his throne. Around him, his top generals stood in tense silence, their once proud expressions now filled with dread. "How many worlds have we lost?" he demanded. A silence followed. Then one of the generals spoke hesitantly. 23. And counting. Virek's claws scratched deep into the stone of his throne. "This is impossible. We are the dominant force in the galaxy. How can a single species, one we nearly wiped out, be doing this?" "They have something we do not," another general muttered. Varek turned his glare toward him. "And what is that?" The general swallowed hard before speaking. "They have nothing left to lose." The Chancellor's eyes flickered. He hated to admit it, but it was the truth. The humans were fighting as if they had already died. Their homeworld was gone. Their people had been slaughtered. And now, they had no fear, only vengeance. Across the galaxy, the Council's enemies were watching closely. For centuries, the Council had ruled with an iron fist, crushing any who dared to challenge them. But now, they were on the defensive. Their mighty war machine was failing, and whispers of rebellion were growing. On a distant planet, a meeting was taking place between three powerful alien factions, species who had long suffered under the Council's rule. They had been too afraid to rise up before. But now, with the humans tearing through the Council's forces like a storm, they saw an opportunity. "We have waited long enough," one of the alien leaders said. "The Council is weak. Humanity has shown us that they can be broken." Another leader, an old warlord with scars running down his face, nodded. "We never stood a chance before, but now we may have a future." And so, across the stars, uprisings began. Inspired by humanity's relentless war, entire civilizations that had been under the Council's control for centuries finally took up arms. Varek received report after report of rebellions. Planetary governors were being overthrown. Military outposts were being destroyed. His once loyal vassals were turning against him. "This cannot be happening," he muttered. The humans had started this war, but now the entire galaxy was rising up. Yet, despite all the chaos, Varek knew the truth. The real terror hadn't even begun. Because humanity wasn't done yet. The Galactic Council's leaders huddled in their war chamber, their faces pale with fear. Reports flooded in from every sector. Entire fleets lost without a trace. Fortress worlds burning. Rebellion spreading like wildfire. The humans were no longer just avenging their fallen. They were reshaping the galaxy with fire and blood. Chancellor Varek stood at the center of the chaos, his claws gripping the edge of the war table. His once proud military commanders, the same ones who had laughed at humanity's weakness, now trembled before him. "How is this possible?" Varek hissed, his voice laced with barely contained rage. "We had the numbers. We had the technology. We had the power." A nervous officer swallowed hard before speaking. "Chancellor, our strategies are useless against them. The humans do not fight like us. They do not hold territory. They strike and disappear. They sabotage our supply lines, assassinate our officers, and cripple our fleets before we even see them." Another commander, his voice hollow, added, "They are not an army, Chancellor. They are an unstoppable storm." Varek's mandibles twitched with frustration. The Council had fought countless wars over the centuries, conquering countless species, but never had they faced an enemy like this. Humanity was not fighting for power, territory, or wealth. They were fighting because they had nothing left to lose. Across the galaxy, the consequences of the Council's mistake were becoming clear. The once mighty Galactic Council was now the hunted. The humans had turned their greatest strength, their dominance, against them. Civilizations that had once feared the Council were now rising in rebellion, emboldened by humanity's wrath. The Council tried to regain control. They declared martial law across their territories, deploying fleets to crush resistance movements. But it was too late. Every ship they sent disappeared. Every fleet they launched never returned. And then came the final blow. The humans had been silent for days. No attacks, no ambushes, no sabotage. The council had hoped, prayed, that they had finally exhausted themselves. But then the humans spoke. A single transmission was sent to every world in the galaxy. Every species, every empire, every ruler heard the same chilling message. We gave you a chance to stop. You did not listen. Now we will show you what fear truly is. It was not a declaration of war. It was a death sentence. And then the human warfleet arrived. Not a scattered force of guerrilla fighters. Not hidden saboteurs. This was something else. A fleet unlike anything the Council had ever seen. Battlecruisers forged from the wreckage of fallen worlds. Warships bristling with stolen technology. A navy built from vengeance, fueled by fury. And at the center of it all was the ship that would end everything. The Nemesis. A monstrous human dreadnought, larger than anything the galaxy had ever seen. Its weapons glowed with energy, its hull covered in scars from 100 battles. It moved slowly, deliberately, like a predator savoring its kill. The Council's last fleet stood between humanity and their final victory. Thousands of ships, the last remnants of an empire that once ruled the stars. Virik watched from his command station, his body frozen as the humans made their final approach. And then, with a single word, the human commander sealed the fate of the Galactic Council. Fire. The war's end had begun. The final battle was not a battle at all. It was an execution. The Nemesis led the human warfleet straight into the heart of the Galactic Council's last stronghold. The Council's remaining fleets, once feared across the stars, stood in tight formation, blocking the path to their capital world. Thousands of warships, countless weapons charged and ready, a final desperate stand against humanity's wrath. But deep inside, every soldier, every officer, every commander knew the truth. They had already lost. Humanity had not come for negotiations. They had not come to demand surrender. They had come to finish what the Council had started. From the bridge of the Nemesis, Admiral Cole watched the enemy forces assemble. His face was emotionless, his eyes cold. There was no satisfaction in what was about to happen. No joy. Only the simple, undeniable truth. This was justice. "Begin the attack," he said. The human fleet moved like a predator striking its wounded prey. From the depths of space, railguns fired hypervelocity slugs that tore through the enemy's front lines. Plasma torpedoes detonated in blinding flashes, ripping Council ships apart before they could even react. Human boarding pods shot forward, slamming into hulls and unleashing soldiers who fought like demons. The Council's admiral screamed desperate orders. "Hold the line. Do not break." But the line did break. It shattered. Some tried to flee, warships turning away in panic, but there was nowhere to run. The Nemesis's long-range cannons picked them off like insects. The great fleets of the Galactic Council, the same fleets that had once ruled the galaxy with an iron fist, were reduced to burning wreckage drifting through space. And then, the capital world itself came into view. The last survivors of the Council huddled in their grand chamber, the same place where they had once laughed at humanity's weakness. Now, that laughter was gone, replaced by silence, by fear. Chancellor Virik stood at the center of them all, his eyes fixed on the massive view screen showing the Nemesis looming over their planet. His claws trembled. He had never feared anything before. He had ruled through strength, through dominance. But now, staring at the approaching human fleet, he understood what it meant to be powerless. A single transmission came through. The face of Admiral Cole appeared, his gaze like ice. Virik found his voice, though it was weak. You can't destroy us all. The Council has existed for thousands of years. We are history itself. Cole's expression did not change. History will remember you. As a warning. And then, the Nemesis fired. A massive, blinding beam of energy erupted from the dreadnought's main cannon, slicing through the planet's orbital defenses in an instant. Explosions rocked the sky. The Council's strongest shield generators melted in seconds. Panic broke out in the capital city below. Civilians screamed, leaders ran, but there was no escape. More human warships followed, unleashing waves of destruction. Precision bombardments leveled government buildings, military outposts, and weapon factories. The Council's power structure, its entire empire, was reduced to rubble within minutes. The once mighty rulers of the galaxy had been reduced to nothing more than dust and echoes. And then, just as suddenly as they had arrived, the human fleet pulled back. The war was over. Admiral Cole stood on the bridge of the Nemesis, watching the burning planet below. A world that had once dictated the fate of the galaxy was now a smoldering ruin. A communications officer turned to him. "Sir, the Council is no more. The remaining systems are surrendering. The galaxy is ours." Cole closed his eyes for a moment, then exhaled. "No," he said. "The galaxy is free." Humanity had not fought for conquest. They had not fought for power. They had fought for justice, and justice had been served.